So this is sort of a full circle moment for them to believe in this project and give me the opportunity to show it in its completion. So thank you guys so much for all you do. They do so much for photographers in Atlanta. They it's accessible to any level of photographer. You get exposed to so many different curators. That first exhibit I was in was curated by Gregory Harris, one of the photography curators at the High Museum. So right off the bat, my first exhibit, I got exposed to that, and I've been working with them ever since, as well as other galleries. But this is my first solo exhibit, so thank you all for coming. And thank you to Madeline, my daughter, who not only really inspired this whole thing, but also helped me. Mm-hmm. She was at almost every shoot with me, holding lights, reflectors, doing the work with me. So I really appreciate her. And to all my friends and family, my village, many of whom are here, and others who are not. It really, this is a collaboration. All the families that participated, all the people who inspired it, Tiffany, Jericho over here, Aracelis Gourmet, Carrie Mae Weems, Bell Hooks, and so many others. I do want to remind you guys that all of the pieces are for sale. I have a price list here. And really selling these just helps me to continue to do this work. Mm-hmm. So supporting the project allows me to photograph more families, to talk about what's happening more. So I appreciate any support, even just sharing or liking or whatever you can do. So I started this just documenting parenthood. I was struggling, and I needed to express it. I needed to use art to understand what was happening to me and my daughter and my family, and the isolation that we were feeling in society. And so I started taking photos of my friends. Tiffany's family was the first, and several other friends, and it just sort of grew. That photo ended up in the airport. It ended up winning first prize in a Black and White Photography Award. When I first took it, I took it just because, it was symbolic to me, and I was exploring how I wanted to express these emotions. But I did not think other people were gonna understand or feel it in the same way I did, but they did. And so I expanded the project, and I put an open call out online, and so many other families, dozens of families around Atlanta reached out to me. I couldn't get to all of them, but I hoped to. But I got to many. And I realized that everybody was experiencing these same things, regardless of race, religion, class. Like, everybody was feeling the same sort of isolation from society, from, their families. It's just a very different world now to raise children in. And then I found some really alarming statistics. And I actually wasn't even going to talk about statistics today. But then the city of Atlanta released some statistics yesterday. And so the most alarming thing I realized when I started doing this was that in the last 10 years, suicide for young people more than doubled, increased by 60% in the last 10 years. And obviously we all know school shootings as well rose in that time, to the point where for 10 to 14-year-olds, suicide was the second leading cause of death. Homicide the third. And yesterday I found out that in Georgia, suicide for 10 to 14-year-olds is now the #1 cause of death. So when I saw that, I was like, I have to mention this. I have to talk about this, because a lot of the research is in there for you if you want to go and dig deep and discover what I discovered. But that is so alarming, and for all the ones who do it, there are so many who are thinking about doing it. Mm-hmm. Another interesting statistic is, when something like that happens, the first people blame is the parents, right? The parents should have done something. But the reality is, mothers spend twice as much time parenting as they did in the 1960s when most were stay-at-home moms. They also spend 4 times as much working paid jobs. Fathers, they actually spend a little less time on paid jobs, but they parent 4 times as much as they did in the 1960s. So what's different? If parents are parenting more than they did ever before, what are they missing? They're missing cousins and aunts and uncles and grandparents and friends who play outside. Their whole village disappeared, and they're just on their phones, right? And you say, oh, just take the phone away from your kid. Their whole community is on that phone.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but unless you hold the microphone up here, the people on the Zoom can't hear you.
Okay. We have to share it, so.
We only have 2.
Yeah, so they're,
I'm just gonna hook it to you. We'll share it later.
okay.
We might not. But she's getting nervous holding that, so I want to see if I can.
So, they don't have a village, they don't have a community. When I was growing up, even if you had bad parents, even if you had an awful household, you had neighbors, you had friends, you had a community of people that you could go to. Hello. My favorite 3-4-year-old. There were other people you could fall on, and recently there was a suicide in the school right down the block from our house 2 weeks ago. And nobody knew what happened yet, but everybody came on and said, where were the parents? What did they do? It's their fault. They should go to jail. And I said, parents are not superheroes. Like we get sick, we get abused, we get fired. All sorts of things happen to us, So it truly does take a village. And so that's what those prints are about. Me understanding the families, talking to them, doing the research, also reading the poetry, because this is where the answers are, I think. And then the second phase, the fabric, you'll see, that's where I started getting into the solutions, from reading the poetry, from reading the books, the inspiration, and thinking through how disconnected we are from the earth, from each other, from just our natural rhythm of being humans, looking at the stars, being with the trees, all of these things. We know that being together in person actually increases our immune system and our serotonin levels. And we have less human interaction, our children, than any generation ever in the history of human species. So, I just wanted to show that disconnection, but also show that it's still there for us. I read a lot of indigenous spirituality, American indigenous spirituality, and how it's so revolved around us being completely interconnected with the animals and the earth and all of these things, how we're all basically one. And that all of the plants and trees and everything in nature, they're all teachers. We can learn how to live in a more sustainable way through their lessons. And so that's what that fabric phase is about, the disconnection, but also that the answers are there, perhaps, for us to reconnect. Another part of the solution is, and I'm going to read this because I liked the words I chose, restoring balance by amplifying voices that carry love and empathy, but also that are fierce enough to stand up to that which would like to divide us. So, let me introduce Tiphanie Yanique, and like I said, I'm going to read her bio, but she's one of my best friends and family here in Atlanta. She was the first family. The picture of her family actually also includes my family and another friend of ours, family Amechi. So, it really symbolizes a lot. Tiphanie is a novelist, a poet, and professor at Emory University. She wrote Monster in the Middle, Land of Love and Drowning, Wife, and How to Escape from a Leper Colony, earning awards like the Bocas Prize and a pushcart, a Virgin Islands native, and also an outspoken Caribbean activist advocating for equity, climate justice, and cultural preservation. She's our moderator today, and I am so grateful for her and everything. And Nasim Fluker, who Tiphanie introduced me to, and Nasim opened her home and her family to us and to many in Atlanta. She's CEO of the 10th, and she's done so much to build community and invite me in, and I'm so grateful. Also, Nasim Fluker is the founder of Third Space and CEO of the 10th, specializing in community partnerships and equitable development. She previously led programs at Westside Future Fund and Atlanta Committee for Progress. Nasim holds degrees from Georgia State and American University and lives in Smyrna with her family. Thank you, Nasim. And Lynsey Weatherspoon is an award-winning photographer and director based in Atlanta and Birmingham, inspired by her late mother and Carrie Mae Weems. She captures history and heritage through photography and film. Her work appears in the New York Times and the Washington Post and documents Black life with depth and dignity. She's exhibited at the African American Museum in Philadelphia and Photoville in New York City. And I admire Lynsey so much. I mean, we were in an exhibit recently together, and you know, sometimes it's just a kindred spirit, and you just know this person is wonderful. And she has a background in journalism, which I do as well, and so I'm so glad she's here to be able to give that perspective, because I think she probably understands from that perspective more than anybody else what I'm trying to do in blending journalism with art. So thank you so much for being here. And now I want to read you guys a poem, and you know, the title of this, The Lost Family, the other part of the title is Summoning the Courage, Making the Cobbler. And that's a line from this poem, and there's also an excerpt from this poem in the exhibit that you'll see. And the other night I was, stressing about all of this and planning this, and I decided to read the poem just to relax and center on what this is all about. She already knows what's about to happen. And I wept. I wept because it is so much more relevant today than it was when I first used it to inspire this project. It's really relevant with what's going on in the world, and it's a bit repetitive at the beginning, but there's a purpose to that. And I know not everybody here might be poetry people, but I really, really want to invite you into what I'm going to call, I actually asked ChatGPT to help me figure out what to call this, sort of an immersion meditation, okay? Where, I want this to anchor us into this project, into this moment and the emotion. And just one side note on that, somehow along the way, emotion got branded as a bad thing, especially as it relates to women. You think too much, you're too emotional. Well, I think emotion is important and it's good, and I think it should be embraced. And so I want to just invite everybody to feel this emotion. And, close your eyes if you want, take notes, draw what you feel. We have a community scrapbook because I really want to focus on, we might not be able to change the world, but we can maybe create something different here right now. So whatever you write, if you want to write your name on the back, if you want to be included in the scrapbook, that's there and you could add it to that. But use it however you feel. But I hope you will feel it. There is an actual message for each and every one of you individually in this poem. So let's go. Be patient with me. I probably will cry.
So, Steph, do you want us to journal and draw as you're reading?
Yes, if whatever you feel. Or close your eyes. Whatever you feel. You Are Who I Love by Araceli Gourmet. You selling roses out of a grocery cart. You in the park, feeding the pigeons. You cheering for the bees. You with cats in your voice in the morning, feeding cats. You protecting the river. You are who I love. Delivering babies, nursing the sick. You with henna on your feet and a gold star in your nose. You taking your medicine, reading the magazines. You looking into the faces of young people as they pass, smiling and saying, "All right," which they know it means "I see you." Family, I love you. Keep on. You dancing in the kitchen, on the sidewalk, in the subway waiting for the train because Stevie Wonder, Hector Lavoe, La Lupe, you stirring the pot of beans, you washing your father's feet, you are who I love. You. Reciting Darwish, then June, feeding your heart, teaching your parents how to do the Dougie, counting to 10, reading your patient's charts. You are who I love. Changing policies, standing in line for water, stocking the food pantries, making a meal. You are who I love. Writing letters, calling the senators. You who, with the seconds of your body, with your time here, arrive on buses, on trains, in cars, by foot, to stand in the January streets against the cool and brutal offices, saying, "Your cruelty does not speak for me." You are who I love. You struggling to see. You struggling to love or find a question. You better than me. You kinder and so blistering with anger. You are who I love. Standing in the wind, salvaging the umbrellas, graduating from school, wearing holes in your shoes. You are who I love. Weeping or touching the faces of the weeping. You, Violetta Parra, grateful for the alphabet, for sound, singing toward us in the dream. You carrying your brother home. You noticing the butterflies. Sharing your water, sharing your potatoes and greens. You who did and did not survive. You who cleaned the kitchens. You who built the railroad tracks and roads. You who replanted the trees, listening to the work of squirrels and birds. You are who I love. You whose blood was taken, whose hands and lives were taken, with or without your saying. Yes, I mean to give. You are who I love. You who the borders crossed. You whose fires. You decent with rage, so in love with the earth. You writing poems alongside children. You cactus, water, sparrow, crow. You, my elder, you are who I love. Summoning the courage, making the cobbler. Getting the blood drawn, sharing the difficult news. You always planting the marigolds, learning to walk wherever you are, learning to read wherever you are. You baking the bread. You come to me in dreams. You kissing the faces of your dead wherever you are, speaking to your children in your mother's languages, tootsing the birds. You are who I love. Behind the library desk, leaving who might kill you, crying with the love songs, polishing your shoes, lighting the candles, getting through the first day despite the whispers, snipping fail, fail, fail. You are who I love. You who beat and did not beat the odds. You who knows that any good thing you have is the result of someone else's sacrifice, work. You who fights for reparations. You are who I love. You who stands at the courthouse with the sign that reads, "No justice, no peace." You are who I love, singing Leonard Cohen to the snow. You with glitter on your face, wearing a kilt and violet lipstick. You are who I love, sighing in your sleep. You playing drums in the procession. You feeding the chickens and humming as you hem the skirt. You sharpening the pencil. You writing the poem about the loneliness of the astronaut. You wanting to listen. You trying to be so still. You are who I love. Mothering the dogs, standing with horses, you in brightness and in darkness, throwing your head back as you laugh, kissing your hand. I just want to give a warning for everybody with kids. There is going to be one curse word in a minute. You carrying the Berber from the mill and the jug of oil pressed from the olives of the trees you belong to. You studying stars. You are who I love. Braiding your child's hair. You are who I love. Crossing the desert and trying to cross the desert. You are who I love. Working the shifts to buy books, rice, tomatoes. Bathing your children as you listen to the lecture. Heating the kitchen with the oven. Up early, up late. You are who I love. Learning English, learning Spanish. Drawing flowers on your hand with a ballpoint pen. Taking the bus home. You are who I love. Speaking plainly about your pain. Sucking your teeth at the airport television every time the politicians say something that offends your sense of decency, of thought, which is often. You are who I love. Throwing your hands up in agony or disbelief. Shaking your head, arguing back out loud or inside of yourself. Holding close your incredulity, which, yes, too, I love. I love your working heart, how each of its gestures, tiny or big, stand beside my own agony, building a forest there. How fuck you becomes a love song. You are who I love. Carrying the signs, packing the lunches, with the rain on your face. You at the edges and shores, in rooms of quiet, in the rooms of shouting, in the airport terminal at the bus depot, saying no. And each of us looking out from the gorgeous unlikelihood of our lives at all, finding ourselves here, witness to each other's tenderness, which this moment is fury, is rage, which this moment is another way of saying, you are who I love. You are who I love. You and you and you are who. That was actually better than I thought it was going to be. Thank you guys. I know that was a little long, but I hope you'll sit with it again. Maybe there's a lot of messages in there, that a lot of imagery that you'll see in the exhibit as well. So thank you. And I'll hand it over to you.
We have to share the mic.
Oh, you guys who forced me to pin it to myself.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. That was beautiful. I know folks are listening to us online, and is it being recorded too? So people might listen to this in the future. And I want everyone who's not in the room to know that the room is packed, that there's standing room only, that we had to bring out more chairs. I think it's important for people to know that this kind of work, this attention to emotion, this attention to families and to art and to practice is not only important, but is seductive, and that people are hungry for it, and they are here voicing that hunger. So thank you guys all for coming. My name is Tiphanie Yanique. I'm a good friend of Stephanie Hanlon, and our families are family to each other. I'm going to be the moderator this afternoon. I'm just going to start by asking a few questions that we will talk amongst ourselves to answer, and then we'll open it up to the audience for you to also ask some follow-up or any kinds of questions you want. And I will say, when it comes time to ask questions, you can ask questions about the exhibit. You can ask each of us individually questions about our own artistic and creative practice. Anything you want to ask, we're here to be supportive and to be in conversation with you as well. So my first question is a situating question, which has to do with just why we're all here in Atlanta, how we all got here. Stephanie made a deliberate choice to have all Atlanta women on a panel together. And so I wondered if you guys could start off by talking about how are you an Atlantan? Whereby do you come to Atlanta? Just anything you want to talk us through so that we know not only who you are professionally, which Stephanie read aloud, but who you are in relation to the space.
I'm Nasim Fluker, and I am fifth generation Atlantan on my mom's side. So my ancestors are buried in the clover leaf of Cleveland Avenue. So if you're ever on Cleveland Avenue on 75 South, you might see a little obelisk that was moved so that they could create 75 South. So my folks on my mom's side go way back to this land. My grandfather's also from Georgia. We have one of the oldest family reunions in the state. And my parents, when my dad's from Iran, and they met on Edgewood Avenue in 1978 at the Atlanta Baha'i Center, and decided to raise their biracial daughter here because Atlanta. They wanted me to be close to at least one set of family. And so I would say, while that part of my Atlanta identity was not intentional, it has been intentional in my adult years to come back and to stay, and deciding to live 10 minutes away from my parents. And you know, it's a constant choice that we make, because there are many things about this place that we wish were different. But my husband and I are, at this moment, committed to building a community here, and that's a daily practice.
Hello, I am Lynsey Weatherspoon. Funny story is I moved here for love, and I'm not even with the person anymore, so thank that person. But I've been here for 11 years now. I have family that were here before I was. I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama, so I didn't move too far from home, but I moved far enough to actualize my life. Like there's one piece of me that will always be, you know, an Alabamian. Born and raised, I love home. But I felt like I had to spread my wings somewhere else to really understand just who I am. I came here to also actualize my dream to be a photographer. I started off as a public speaking instructor before I transitioned full-time into a freelance photographer. So all of my passions as far as community, as far as art, as far as like just being in surroundings like this, I feel like now I understand even more why it was meant and why Spirit led me to move to Atlanta.
I'm from New York originally, but I was living in the Virgin Islands, which is how I know several people here, including Tiffany. I lived in the Virgin Islands for 10 years as a journalist, and I started working in corporate communications for a company there. And in 2017, we were hit with a Category 5 hurricane. And it actually didn't hit our island that bad, St. Croix, but it hit our neighboring island, St. Thomas, and St. John also pretty bad. And we had friends and family there too, so we had sent all of our supplies over there to our friends and family. And then we didn't have power either, and a couple of weeks later, another Category 5 hurricane started heading our way. And the company I worked for, they have offices here in Atlanta too, and they said, we'll evacuate you guys and your family on the last plane out. And I thought, there's no way we're getting hit with a second Category 5 hurricane, but I'll take a free trip to Atlanta. And so I did, and it ended up devastating the island. And we were in evacuation mode for 4 months after that, living in an extended stay with rental cars, and at first it was awful, but then after a while I said, there's actually, a lot of things, some of the galleries and artistic opportunities and educational opportunities for my daughter that I said, I think I should stay and try this. And so I still work for the same company, actually. And, my daughter is from the Virgin Islands. She's a native Virgin Islander, and so we still go back and are very close with there. But I love Atlanta. I really do. I think it is there's such a strong community. It's like there is some city elements, but it's also kind of like a small town. I don't know how to explain it. It's like, especially in the art world, I feel like everybody's my friend and family. It's almost like in the Virgin Islands when you're walking down the street and you know everybody, It feels like that a little bit here, so I think that's why it's a good middle ground for me. So yeah.
I came to Atlanta in 2019, and I came for work. So a little similar maybe to Stephanie, except I wasn't being evacuated from a hurricane. But I came actually to join a particular work community, which was Emory University's creative writing program, which is led actually by Dr. Jericho Brown, who's in the audience. And I wanted to be around other creative people and work alongside them, and the creative writing program at Emory afforded me that. But one of the things that I was really nervous about coming to Atlanta was my family gonna be okay? We had a lot of connections in New York where we had been before, and then before that, we were home in the Virgin Islands. So I was really nervous about whether or not my kids were gonna find good community. And it turns out that what many people think might be the largest diaspora of Virgin Islanders is actually here in Atlanta. So some of those people are in the room right now. But there are so many Virgin Islanders and also so many artistic people, not only at Emory, but all over the community in Atlanta, that we have really found a meaningful community here. But I was thinking too, when you were talking about the fact that the picture that I'm in, it was the first picture, and then you said something that I hadn't heard you say before, which was that it's not really, although you say Tiffany's family, it's not just my family in the picture. You're an artist, so there's a little bit of artifice happening in the picture where it looks like it's me and my family. But it's actually your family also in the picture, and my friend Amechi's family also in the picture. And so in a way, it also symbolizes the whole concept of community and needing a village, because the whole village was there in my bedroom for that picture, you know? And part of it was my kids refused to do what they were supposed to do in the picture, so then we had to bring in Maddie, her daughter, and Amechi's kid, and so therefore we ended up having a bunch of other kids that I didn't give birth to in the picture. So it feels really symbolic, I think. But I think that picture, I also seem like a tired matriarch in the picture. And I wondered if we could all talk a little bit about this word matriarch, which Sue Ross, who was originally part of this conversation, some of you may have known she was going to be part of this and she couldn't be here today. One of the things when I spoke to Sue about, Sue Ross is a native Atlantan photographer, she said like, oh, that word matriarch is kind of heavy. You know, that's a heavy word. And she said, I don't know if I'm a matriarch. And I'm, well, of course you are, Sue, you're a matriarch. But what does that really mean to us to be matriarchs? Do you think of yourself as a matriarch? And maybe it's a biological matriarchy, but are there other types of matriarchy in which you see yourself identifying with? That maybe people in this room can also be welcomed into that identification. And I think because patriarchy is such a big word in our mind, given what's happening in our national politics, it might be interesting also for us to define what we understand by matriarchy, so we have common language for the rest of our conversation. So if you guys could just talk about how you identify with that word matriarchy, what you think it means, how are you a matriarch? You can begin anywhere there.
Yeah, so for me, there's two parts of that. I think I actually agree with both of them. I think there is something in women, just our connection to the moon and the earth, that, you know, we have a certain intuition that I think should be amplified more than it is. But also I think matriarchy is more of a ideology than it is about a gender. You know, a lot of people just think, oh, that means women in charge. But I think really anybody can rule or lead or, you know, act in a way that is more matriarchal. And how I distinguish the two is, you know, patriarchy is more about protection and resources and wealth and, you know, collecting stuff and land and all of these things, right? And making sure we're strong and all of that. But matriarchy is more, are we okay? You know, are we healthy? Are we happy? Are we living in a way that is sustainable? You know, and I think there just needs to be balance in the world, right? We need to be protected, we need resources, but what's really the point of all that if we're not happy or healthy, right? So I think that there really needs to be some balance of both of those ideologies. And again, I think, you know, we've had Queen Elizabeth, a female leader in a patriarchy, right? You can have male leaders in a matriarchy. I don't think it's necessarily gender, which is what a lot of people go to is, oh, you think you don't need men. No, you know, we need everybody, you know, we just need balance, you know, and I personally think well-being should be the first thing. That, I think, should be the most important thing. And I think for 95% of human history, we did think that way. But for this 5%, we're more focused on wealth, and I think that's a problem.
So, it's okay, right? A mic is a mic. So I had to also sit with the word matriarch because I am a single, cisgender, lesbian woman. So I have all of these things about myself. I'm like, well, am I? I don't have any children. Am I maybe like a matriarch to my friends' children? Have I ever thought that I would have a role such as that? So I had to look up just to see like what are some other versions of matriarch. So you have, I see this one that I looked up yesterday. It said the matriarch is usually a strong maternal figure who is emotionally attached to, unfortunately, the patriarch leader, whether a mother, aunt, sister, or wife. And I'm just like, still not sticking with me. So what, if I had to like really consider just what matriarch means to me, I feel like in a way there is that, you know, that motherly instinct that I may carry for myself, for my friends, for people that I have mentored in a way. But I think I'm still trying to find, like you said, that balance of what does that mean for someone who is childless or someone who, I'll even go even further. I lost my mother 9 years ago, so it's kind of like, how do I reparent myself to even consider myself to be a matriarch? So I don't have a real answer for the whole thing. I just have a lot of questions. And if anything, I appreciate you for even asking that. Because now I think that I will have to develop in my own mind and in my own sense or in this era of my life to really understand what matriarch is. And I hope that was helpful to you all. Yeah.
When I heard it, I was like, I'm too young to be a matriarch. I'm 40, almost 40. But I always associated that with, you know, my grandmother, maybe, best case scenario, or somebody's grandmama, not me. And also not the mother that I have. I mean, she's wonderful. Most of y'all know, some of y'all know her, but she doesn't give matriarch. And then I was thinking about, well, what changed when my maternal grandmother did die? And we lost a connection, you know, I think the siblings kind of went their own way. We lost a central gathering point, her house, where we didn't have a family holiday ever again after that. What else changed? So I was trying to think of like, what does the absence of that mean for me? That just consistency and kind of a soft place to land, and that, I guess, the gatherer, and in that way. And it was a quiet gathering. It wasn't formal all the time. It was just, we could go to her house and that would be available to us without a lot of pretense. It could be informal. You could drop by. Maybe there's food, maybe there's not, but you could try to find something if you want to. It was like that vibe. And so, I mean, I guess in some ways that's what I try to conjure through the work that I do at the 10th, but just even without, you know, outside of that, I've always wanted to have that type of home, whether it was in a basement apartment somewhere or the house we live in now or whatever, but that was, being that soft place to land has always been important to me, and kind of how I associate that soft power. You know, there's a power in gathering, there's a power in convening and connecting people, even if it's not forceful.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the version of matriarchy that we actually interestingly didn't talk about because it's the one that we most often think about. We're all like nervous about talking about just being mothers, right? And I think for me, my motherhood is a really important part of my identity. I write through my motherhood, I friend through my motherhood, and sometimes, just to be more explicit, that means like having a household where my friends can drop their kids off to, you know, and they know that their kids are gonna get loved by me, and that their kids will get treated the exact same way I treat my kids, which if you have to figure out what that is to see if you like that, because they're gonna get the same thing. But for me, that's a really important part of being a matriarch, is making sure that my friends know that their children will also be mothered if they're under my cover, and that they will be under my cover. But I also need that from my children too, because I have an active, creative, intellectual life. And right now my kids are not here. They were here on Thursday for the opening, but they're right now running around on a soccer field. And there are a number of mothers and fathers who are watching over them because they know I'm here. And so I know that other people are doing that work for me too. And, I think whether it means having a house that you make available for other people know they can knock on your door. Even my students at Emory, I don't know if I should be saying this in front of my boss, but, I tell, sometimes in class, I will say to them, like, I'm your mama, okay? Which means I'm about to be hard on you, but I love you. Because I do think that even my students are hungry for that. As freshmen, sophomores, students, sometimes many of them are away from home for the very first time, and they want to be challenged by their professors because they are really smart students, but they also want to know that they are loved. And I make sure that they feel that way when they're in my classroom. So I'm extending it even there. But I also wanted to pick up on one of the things that you said, Nasim, because you start off by saying, I'm too young to be a matriarch. But then, and I was like, girl, I'm about to say how I am a matriarch. I'm not that much older than you, just so you know. What you described that your grandmother provided, and you allowed a little bit of grief to enter into your statement when you said, like, we never had a family gatherings like that all together ever again. Which you said really quickly, but I imagine there's a deeper sadness in there, so thank you for also sharing that with us. But what you are doing actually with the tent sounded exactly like what you were talking about. You were like, oh, it's a place where you can just show up and maybe there's food, you could dig around, and I was like, but that's what I'd be doing at your house, Nasim. What are you talking about? I'll be opening your fridge and stuff. What do you mean? So it made me think that actually, some of us, have our mother still in our lives. Some of us have our aunties, our grandmothers, the men in our lives who also did that nurture work. Some of us no longer have our mothers. We have a mother, actually. Stephanie's mom is actually here. You guys know she was matriarching for all of us because she made those cookies that y'all are all eating. So we're all enjoying her cover here today. But I wonder if you could talk about the ways in which the creative work that you are each doing is also a way to resist the problematic aspects of what we might call the patriarchy. Because I'm with Stephanie, we want balance, so I'm not gonna say patriarchy is all the way bad, but we don't have a balance, right? So which means we then have to resist it. So I wonder if you guys could talk about the work that you do, whether it's the creative work, organizing work, programming work, other kinds of work that might not be biological mothering, that might still open up community and nurturing for other people. Welcome in, guys. I think we have some more chairs coming. So if you're holding a child, just wait a second. We'll have a chair for you in a second. Yeah, those of you on the Zoom, it's getting, we're about to have like Thanksgiving up in here any minute. It's amazing. Okay, so whoever would like to start just talking through like your particular work, and tell us, you can be a little bit showy, tell us what exactly it is that you do, because some of us might actually want to know about that and be involved and be in the village with you. As Stephanie was talking about being in the village, that the statistic she read to us at the beginning, right, about how much parenting parents are doing without a village, which means that like there's a whole village that needs to be activated, and some of that village is right here in the room, and maybe we're all here being like, hey, activate me. So if there's a way in which you guys could like talk through, how is it what you do? How is that community building? How is that nurturing? How is that collective?
That's a good question.
Yes.
I think what you said about each one of them, as you introduce them, the things that they do, maybe not for kids, maybe not for family, but I think that puts them in the matriarch.
Just for the sake of the Zoom, I'll repeat what you said. One of our audience members said that Just based on what Stephanie Hanlon read about each of us, we are already doing the work of a matriarch, and that we should embrace that. Yeah, okay.
And what's your name?
Harriet Fender,
Okay.
Chip's mother.
Okay, nice. Well, thank you for that compliment, Harriet. I feel like, well, first let me explain what I do. So I am a photographer, a photojournalist in the editorial and documentary space. So a good bit of the work that I do conduct is naturally around emotions. So navigating emotions, navigating, depending on the story, a bit of trauma, but also trying to put people at ease. I mean, when you think about the situations of the world, not just now, just whenever, someone just needs somebody just to lean on that they don't necessarily know. And it's you know, I'm definitely not taking away from the job of a therapist, but photographers, in a way, we are that person's therapist in the moment. I know there's been plenty of times where I've arrived to an assignment and I haven't taken out my camera within the first hour and a half of just sitting there. I'm just like, you know what, let's get comfortable, you know, that type of thing. And I feel like, you know, just to insert, we were talking about patriarchy and things of that nature. As I have developed associates, because everybody is not my friend, as I've developed associates in the photography space, I realized that there are a lot of people, specifically white men, who walk into the spaces as if they're like, you know what, you need to be doing what I say. And I'm like, wait a minute. We need to be able to sit down and listen and realize like this moment is not meant to like make this picture first, but to really gravitate to that person's emotions first. So, you know, now it feel like it's coming full circle with the whole matriarch question. It's just like I'm so involved in a person's life. If I never see them again, I need them to understand that this moment is for you. If you don't want to do it, we don't have to. I respect you enough to say, hey, I can call the editor now and say they chose not to and call this a day. But all in all, I think that no matter what field or what type of artistry or community you're in, you have to understand the balance and like the cadence of any type of emotion. Being able to communicate what's going on in the environment, just being able to communicate, period, like just full stop there. So I think for me, as far as a photographer, I think my overall goal is to just make sure that there's safety and support, no matter what the case is. So I guess that's where my motherly instinct just really kind of pops out as a storyteller, as just an all-around listener, as a person that just wants to make sure that person knows, like, hey, I got you right now, and if you need me later, I got you then. But all in all, just like you said, Stephanie, like just making sure that with photojournalism, sometimes it is hard to not put your emotions into something, because you're meant there to do a job. You're meant to be there as it's a job. I don't look at it as a job. I feel like in the moment we're both probably healing something within each of us. So that connection is going to be limitless no matter what I do as far as my practice goes.
Lynsey, could you just tell us a little bit, like, where could we find you and your work?
Oh, sure. So you can go to my website. My name is Lynsey Weatherspoon. That's Lynsey. Last name is Weatherspoon. When I tell you I knew how to spell a lot of words because I had to spell my name. So, but on Instagram, you can also find me under LN Weatherspoon. So you'll see a smattering of work that deals with just connection, some deep reflection, and lots of communication with people.
I can attest to that because Lynsey took our photos for the 10th that are going to be in Atlanta Magazine in May, so make sure you get it. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm up to these days. I started a social club with my husband called the 10th, kind of a tongue-in-cheek 10th, talented 10th vibe. It's reinterpreting. and pulling what we liked about the Harlem Renaissance and that period in American history, where folks were gathering informally and rubbing shoulders with artists, creatives, politicians, just folks. And we feel like a real spark emerged from that time, and we're interested in creating that here, and know that people have gathered for centuries informally and have learned together, have built community together, have challenged each other, and what started as a very intimate gathering in our home, where kids are welcome because we have two, and so that's why it was at our house, because we didn't want to worry about them breaking everybody else's stuff. We were like, let's just have it here, and grew from there. And so for the past 9 months, I think we've been running the 10th, and it is, I think entrepreneurship generally is a very creative practice, and you are constantly balancing your mission and what you want to do with, labor and production and capitalism and all of these things, right? And so it's not so cut and dry, but that's kind of the work that I'm in right now, and you can find us at the10th.club on Instagram, and that's also our website.
And Nasim, just so we all know, can people still join the 10th?
Yes, you can join the 10th. You can find out more at the10th.club/join. But yes, it is open. We don't have an application. If you want to check it out first, let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions and invite you to a salon on us for free. Yeah, the cadence is a monthly salon with some additional activities that we have for members. And we interview different luminaries who we think are doing dope work in the city and beyond, because sometimes we need that too, Atlanta. But yeah, folks who are doing work that revolves around community and culture, and we have a very big tent about how we understand that work.
And they feed us too.
Yes, and we feed you.
I think for me, for a long time, I dedicated myself to journalism because I thought, I could tell the truth, let me just show people what it is, the facts, objectively, And obviously, there's a lot of problems in journalism right now, and I ended up going into the corporate world, and there's a lot of us out there. There's a lot of us out there that I think would rather, be in journalism, but especially with everything going on today, I think I sort of lost faith in it a little bit because I realized facts aren't really what move people. And unfortunately, they aren't really what changes things. I was very dedicated to objectivity for a long time. And I think as an artist, I've really had to embrace subjectivity and the emotion of it, because I think, we can speak all day long, but it's really when we feel that our minds are changed and we're moved to do something different. So it's interesting that, there's actually a movement right now to say that empathy is a weakness, to say that, empathy is not a good thing. And so I think at this point, me just even talking about emotion feels revolutionary. Me just even inviting you to feel what we feel as parents, as family, as people who are isolated, in itself feels like a revolution. And that sounds crazy. Why should that be? But it sort of is now, so.
Yeah, empathy is pretty much what I'm teaching my students. As a professor of fiction writing, my students come in with skills, how to build a character, how to paint a scene, but none of that really works very well if they cannot feel connected to their characters. If they think of their characters as monolithic or as just tools to get across their agendas, their story is going to fail. So it's a really important tool that I'm up to and when I'm teaching them how to develop their empathy muscle so that they can write more meaningful, more beautiful stories that then reading itself also becomes an act of empathy. So when you open up a novel, which is, it is very subjective, it's not a piece of journalism, and you read a novel and you follow a character or many characters through the course of hundreds of pages, you are engaging with those people at an empathetic level, these made-up people at an empathetic level, which allows you to develop your own empathetic muscle. So you can then take that muscle of empathy into the greater world, which I think that's activist work, so helping my students write more beautiful books is an important part of my job, but also myself writing more beautiful books. So I'm a poet and a novelist, and Stephanie has one of my books of poetry up here, and thank you, Dr. Brown, yes, I'm a poet, for me, writers, most of us don't make a ton of money. So for me, a lot of my work is wanting to make sure that I write a full book that you can get lost inside of, and surrender yourself over to, so that you can fall in love with my characters. And then maybe sometimes fall in love with someone who you didn't think you would or even should fall in love with, which I then hope will translate out into your life, right? So ultimately, I want my writing to change your life. I also want it to change my life. I want the writing process to always be helping me reinvent myself into a better version of myself. Like the idea of writing itself as a way to sharpen myself so that I can be a better point of light in this world. So in teaching, we're thinking a lot about AI and tools like ChatGPT, and how they might harm or maybe help the creative life. And one thing I'm really concerned about, and this will be my last question for you guys, and I'll open it up to the audience, is there something about the process of making photography, of making journalism and photography, of planning, programming, and bringing people together? Is there something about the process of that that is valuable and that is in itself revolutionary? So not just the outcome, the outcome, of course, is we all get to hang out at the 10th. The outcome is we all get to come to our art gallery. The outcome is we all get to see Lynsey's art in the Atlanta magazine. But I'm thinking more about the process behind of it, because AI and ChatGPT are maybe threatening to take away that process and just give us the product quickly. And it seems to me like that's gonna cause a loss of empathy, because the making of a poem, or in my case, even the making of a whole narrative of hundreds of pages in a novel, is a years, plural, long process of engaging deeply with my ghosts, with the traumas in my family, with political issues around the world, and trying to translate that for strangers who will never meet me to feel compelled by. And that process feels vital to my humanity. And so I wonder if you guys could talk about the process itself of what you do. And then again, after that, I'll turn it over to you guys for questions.
Yeah, this is the camera I use to take all the film photos in there. And, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys saw it. It got taken off the internet, so you may not have seen it. But Apple had come out with this ad that had a room full of gorgeous analog technology, like guitars and paints and canvases and cameras and record players, and I was looking at this room and I'm like, oh, look, I love all that stuff, like a piano, and I'm like, this is beautiful. And then a big metal plate came and very, very slowly crushed everything in a very graphic way, right? Where the paint is splattering, the guitar strings are flinging, and my whole soul felt crushed, I was just like, and then the metal plate comes up and there's an iPad. And that was the moment I knew I was done with Apple. Not quite yet, but I realized, I don't actually own my things anymore. And then I realized, this was built in the 1950s. And, this requires no battery, no electricity, fully mechanical. And it just works after all these years. This thing we need to replace every 3 years? Have we advanced? Or is the innovation for profit and not to actually serve us?
100%.
Right? You know, I might be getting the date wrong, but I hear that there is a light bulb that was turned on in 1930 somewhere in the world that is still going today, you know? So using analog processes feels really important to me. What's also interesting is there is no digital camera that can produce images like this still. So have we really, you know, innovated? But as far as my process also, you know, it all is about emotion. And when I was doing digital photography, you know, you take 1,000 pictures trying to get a perfect one. And I lost my creativity, I lost my emotion in it. And so going back to this, you get 12 shots. Of all of those families in there, I only took 12 pictures of each of those families. 12 pictures you get on one roll of this. But you slow down, you look at your light meter, you are intentional, you think it through, and it allows you to be in the emotion of it. It allows you to be in that moment. So that's a really important part of my process.
That was lovely. She didn't hear you. She didn't hear you at all. So sorry. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding with you. I'm just kidding. But I truly understand where you're coming from. And I feel like in certain instances, the kids are all right. You know, they have these tools, but how can we teach them to use them responsibly? Because some of these things that we have, you know, our disdain for, they have a use. I'm not going to say all of them, but they have their place. But as far as like my practice has gone back to just being much more conscious of what I'm making rather than just taking pictures of around, you know, of everything, because you can get lost in the fact that you have this camera that has this probably 1 terabyte card inside of it, and you never take it out until you realize you have to take the pictures off of it, you know? So you have like this endless and boundless storage of everything. But my practice has since scaled back just a little bit. I'm definitely much more intentional, whether it's with this camera, with film, with my phone, anything. I'm just like, does everything deserve me having something tangible from it? I've made the conscious decision to try to remember things again. You know, I don't have, some things I purposely don't make the work because I'm like, my brain needs to still function. I don't want to have to scroll back and be like, oh, okay, well, I think I was there, or I think I talked to this person. Let me go back and look. Like, no, let me write it in my journal. Let me write about that experience. So it comes back to what I believe all of us have been talking about. It's just like the community, the connection, and the emotion of everything. And I'll just let it stick there. I don't have anything else to say about that.
I mean, go ahead. Go ahead.
And I have to say Sue Ross, who was supposed to,
Say it in the mic.
sorry, Sue Ross, who was supposed to be here, she couldn't be here for a situation, but one of the reasons she was involved is because, you know, she's a legendary Atlanta photographer, and I look up to her, and she had, after I found out about the situation, she posted that she was part of a domestic violence committee. And I reached out to her and I was like, Sue, I really want to help this mom. Do you know it? She made a phone call. She helped us. You know, we got her into the shelter the next day, I think. So I just want to also thank Sue for that. And I really want to thank you too, because you like made it all really real. You know what I mean? I was like, I can't just talk about we need a village and then somebody, you know, needs something. And so, you know, we spent that Christmas together with Tiffany and our families, and a bunch of people got gifts, and you showed me what this is really all about in the end, so.
She would know that sometimes we were hungry, and she would say, okay, well, I'm just gonna bring a little something. She would come and she would pop the trunk. She would have clothes from her friends, food, blankets, toys for my baby because there wasn't much toys at the shelter. She never brought just a little thing. She always went back to her community who came together, and because of the delicacy of the situation, because we were in it was a safe house, domestic violence shelter, and she moved tactically, like, and she always came with so much stuff, and we are so grateful.
I love you guys. And you'll have to meet her daughter, because she is one of the coolest human beings you will ever encounter.
Do you mind sharing your name? Shonda. So for the folks on Zoom, Shonda. So Shonda, we first want to say thank you, because, let me get myself together. It takes courage to even share that and to know that you have not only Stephanie as your village, but the rest of this room as your village as well, because now you're part of us and we're part of you. So we appreciate you sharing that.
And that's it.
Nasim is being sweet, but I want to say that we all met Sue Ross at Nasim's. So even the connections are all there, you know? Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. You have to be together in real life at some point, consistently to build up friendships. And they are real and they have ripple effects. There's no way we can quantify all the effects that, you know, or all the things, all the impact of what it is to host a regular event, for example. There's no sense in trying, but you know, that's the whole point. And I think what I've learned through hosting and through bringing folks together is there is a power and vulnerability of asking for help and receiving help, making the invitation and accepting the invitation. You know, like, I think what I've noticed is people they have a lot of reservations about making the invitation, of inviting people into their home. You bring 11 of these people come to your house? Like, well, this is just a building. It's okay. And that's a risk I'm willing to take. And I think that we all, when you're asking, you know, what can other folks do? I think it's take the risk. It's worth that moment of vulnerability for what's possible as a result of it.
There's just a few thank yous I want to say real quick, because I forgot to say them at the beginning. We were talking about mothers, and my mother flew here from New York to help me, and she's been dealing with my attitude this past week as I get ready for this.
Mom, come on.
Mom, Mrs. Hanlon?
I was just saying.
She's
Yeah, you can come here. Come here. She's a little traumatized from it, to be honest. No, but, you know, she stuck through my attitude because I've been so stressed getting ready for all of this and helped me with my daughter. And she made these cookies, and these cookies are really important. She bakes, she's a baker in New York. And the rainbow cookies, they're a traditional Italian cookie in the colors of the Italian flag. My grandmothers were Italian. So I grew up my whole life in New York eating these cookies. They're the best thing ever. But the other cookies, the cinnamon roll cookies, were my grandmother's recipe. And I grew up making those my whole life and eating those. They're also the best thing ever. So I hope you can try one. I hope there's still some there so you can at least get one to try. And I also want to acknowledge Jim Alexander, another legendary Atlanta photographer who actually reviewed this work. I went and visited him at his studio, and he gave me his opinions on it. And it was such an honor to see his work and also to hear his perspectives on this work. And so thank you for being here. And also, Dawn for bringing the cookie stuff today and for picking me up when I got in a car accident and everything. And so many other people who help with the installation. And also so many families are here that you'll see in the pictures of the wall. So thank you guys all for trusting me. I mean, you guys trusted me within your homes and your families, and I connected with each and every one of you on such a deep way. And I love you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm now going to open it up for questions. Do we need to pass the microphone around in the room?
We can share one and then another one.
Okay, so I'm happy to bring the microphone around for questions. And how should we moderate questions from on the Zoom, or should we?
I let everybody in the Zoom know that if they want questions, to put them in chat, and I'll ask them.
Perfect. Okay. So if you raise your hand. Okay.
Linda Plansted, who was in the Zoom meeting, did want me to pass a message to Stephanie about how proud she is of you and how happy she is to have this work in the world.
Thank you, Linda. And Linda started a group where she's a huge inspiration. I'll have to share her information with you guys. She is a wonderful photographer also, and she has a group of creatives who, just given everything going on in the country, are trying to get together and see how we can just make art to, if not deal with all our emotional issues surrounding it, maybe actually make change in the world too. So I really appreciate you too, Linda. I think Maddie had a question. That's my daughter who helped with this and inspired this. She's in 2 of the photos, actually.
So what's like a moment you've had where you realized like, wow, I have to keep doing this? Like any moment like you've had in your life that is more important than you thought it would originally be? Like what's something you thought like that?
Well, obviously the moment with Rashonda and Shondell was, I honestly, when I even just met them before I knew about the situation, we bonded and connected, and I knew we were going to be friends. But there was another one, since I've told you about that one, I want to tell you about another one. There was another one with one of the families, 3 kids, and one of the young boys, when I came in, he right away, I just had met them, took my hand and said, "Can I show you my room? Can I show you my things?" And he took me around, and how are you feeling? It just was so kind. And when I was leaving, he looked at me and he said, "Are you going to remember me? Because I'm going to remember you forever." And I was just like, oh my God, this is why I'm doing this, And also, I don't know if I mentioned this, but, when we look at the situation with our kids, just on a somber note real quick, it's all of our responsibility, whether you have kids or not, all of us, our kids are, they're seeing what you post on social media, they're seeing what you're saying and doing in real life. When I first started this, I started with the question, if it takes a village to raise a child, what happens when we don't have any villages? And then I realized we do have villages, just not conscious ones, just not ones where people are actually consciously participating in it. So you are raising the next generation, whether you realize it or not, whether you're deciding to or not. And your future lives will be dependent on them as well. So I see, it's a lot about individualism. And, individualism, it's not only is it not kind, but it's really just not smart, because we all need each other, or we're going to at some point. So I don't know if that really answered the question or not, but thank you.
My name is Jim Alexander. I've been in photography since 1952. Lynsey, you might be able to help me with this.
Yes, sir.
I've taught from kindergarten up to Yale and Emory and all of these places, and I still have problems when people or students ask me about this whole idea of subjectivity. All right, it's been a hard thing with me.
Yes, sir.
Because my thing is, if I'm telling somebody, you got this camera in your hand, you can shoot what you want to shoot, all right, and so on and so forth, all right? And people will ask me, they want pictures for magazines, newspapers, whatever, and they want to pick and choose which pictures, I shoot,
Yes, sir.
all right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, I got choices, all right, of what I shoot, and
You
I got
absolutely
choices
do.
of what I submit to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what about subjectivity?
That's a loaded question right there. Because what I'm realizing is, depending on the moment, I don't think that you actually can, because a lot of you is inserted in the image that you make. So you have a person or a publication that asks you, you need to be kind of middle of the road, and you're like, I can, but it's not an actual thing, because I'm showing you this thing, this moment, this place, the way that I have processed it. So, and maybe you can help as well. Like, to be a subjective photographer, at least in this time in my life that I'm older and I have some experience, I don't necessarily believe that I am. I don't think that I'm a objective subject. I think I'm just, at this point, I need to tell you just what it is and the way that I see it, Yes, sir. Like, honest across the board, even when it comes to, like, the editing of the photo or the framing of it. If that's how I saw the moment, that's what the moment is going to be. So now I'm going off on a longer tangent, so excuse me for a second. So I think even for stories, like long form stories that I've been commissioned to do, I realize that people are asking, or editors are asking, hey, we asked you specifically because we like the way that you tell that particular story. So I hope in the generations moving forward, even with you all, you don't necessarily have to be a photographer, but to understand, though we may not want the truth, the pictures will always prove what the truth is, whether it's coming from your opinion or just being in the moment. I mean, look at what's going on right now. And then I'll be quiet. But if you look at, if you had to understand well, let's put it like this. If you paid attention to what or who the photographers were before this current administration, it's completely different. You have a smattering of photos that you saw all of the time coming from our last administration. I don't think we've seen anything that has come from this particular one. So obviously we know the impact of photography. We understand that what we see is what it is. So I think in anything that you do, understand that there's a power in the visual that you may not see and the visuals that you aren't seeing. Does that make sense to you all? Gotcha. All right. That's all I wanted to say.
Hey, Lynsey, would you do me a favor?
Sure.
I don't know if everybody has their chats pulled up on Zoom. Can you just make an announcement if they have questions, just to put it?
Sure. I'll make that announcement to the folks on Zoom. Okay. Hi, Zoom audience. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, please. So put your questions in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Did I miss something in the last question? Because either I didn't hear the question or I don't understand what the problem is. Like he said, subjectivity. I've been teaching subjectivity. Tell me about that. I don't. And then you said things that seem. I mean, it seemed.
I may have.
It seems like.
Words unconsciously.
But what was the trouble?
What's the trouble of what?
Like he seemed to be asking a question that was trouble. Mm-hmm. But when you answered it, your answer didn't sound like the answer to no trouble. You just said, so I just think maybe we all missed out on the trouble.
Okay.
So, as good people who love gossip, I just want to know, I would like to know, and I'm imagining somebody else would, what it is that we missed outside of the photography world, because You said a thing, but it didn't sound like anything anybody would disagree with. I don't think. So I don't understand what happened. Can you help me?
I think that photographers had a moment to ourselves versus the entire audience, and for that, I will apologize for that.
Yeah, but we still want to know, though.
I think you're trying to get me in trouble.
I don't think. Oh, never mind.
No. I think let me see if I can answer this in a better way that is much more universal than the pockets of visual artists that's here. I believe that you should teach subjectivity when it comes to photography. I think the whole spectrum of photography in itself has changed. There's a lot of it that has changed because people think that we need to make photos for, at least in my opinion, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think that people want us to make photos to appease to other people rather than, again, creating the work that is the truth in the moment. And I feel like I just need to, just in a healthy way, stop there versus continuing because my mind is just going everywhere with an answer. But I'm gonna stop there. Maybe we can have an
Okay.
offline
I
conversation.
mean, it's just, okay, sure.
All right.
Any other questions?
Oh, okay. Well, just simply put, Tony. My name's Tony Belser. Hello. Known Stephanie for quite a few years now, and been friends for a long time. And I'm happy to be here. Just general question. I don't want to make it seem too broad, but at the same time, it is broad. What keeps the fire going? What keeps the inspiration coming? What drives you to continue doing what you're doing? Is it a headline? Is it like, milestone ages? Is it, seeing part of yourself grow up in front of your eyes? Like, what is it that just keeps you wanting to communicate on a mass scale with what you do continuously?
Sadness and rage.
All right.
For me, there are two things. One, my children are not old enough that they can come to my readings, and my eldest can't even read my books. And when they come to my readings and they come up to me afterwards and they're like, "Wow, Mom, that was amazing." And my youngest is 8, and we were in the Virgin Islands for a symposium called Decolonial Feeling that with the collective that I'm a part of, we helped launch and run with also the help of Emory and a lot of other amazing organizations. And I gave a reading there, and then somebody went up to my 8-year-old who was with me afterwards and said, "Are you proud of your mom?" Which is a thing that people say to my kids sometimes, right? And they don't know what is your kid gonna say? And Nazareth said, "I'm always proud of my mom." And I think, I write for those little moments too, like, because I know my hope is that my books outlast me and are things that I'm leaving behind for my children and for other people's children to have. But I would say even that is not what keeps me going. That's like a little, it's like the award that I get at the end is my children's love and adoration. But I actually love the process. And, I tell my students too, like, if you're the kind of writer who goes to the page and is like, "I hate the page, I hate writing, it's so suffering," like, if you feel that way about writing, please don't be writing, if it feels like punishment to you, maybe you should do something else. And so for me, the actual process is really edifying, uplifting, and it's a way for me to engage with myself on a deeper level. I enjoy the process. So a day when I get to wake up and write is always gonna be a good day.
Love, anger, and rage so far.
What keeps the fire? I think what keeps the fire within me is knowing that folks like Miss Alexander, Stephanie, and our archives will be of importance to somebody. And when they find it, they'll understand that there are stories out there that that existed, at a specific moment in time. So Keeping the archives growing and alive is what keeps me alive.
When they find it, when you sell it.
That too.
No, it's joy. I don't do well when I'm not motivated by joy. I quit. I'm a quitter. So if it's not fun for me, I quit. So I finally found something I like to do, and so I do that. I know when it's time for me to move on. I'm learning different ways to say that so it doesn't sound defeat. I don't mean it as a bad thing, but I just don't believe hard don't get much of my time. That's all.
We have time for one more question, because we do want those of you who came in late to have time to peruse the exhibit itself. So if there's another question, either in the audience here or on Zoom.
I just want to make a quick comment. I just want to say thank you for opening yourselves to this process and sharing your experiences, and then just helping everyone understand that we are not alone, and we're all going through this process together. And so I think a lot of us get in our silos and in our heads, and we don't share the bits with each other to kind of flush it out, flush it through, and just kind of be like, you know what, yeah, that pissed me off, and then that drove me to go paint or to go take pictures or to go whatever, and that came out the best way. So sometimes learning how to redirect or just bouncing it off of each other helps you not know that you're not crazy, but also affirming the things that you feel on the inside, to just be like, yeah, you got that. Yep, when you get pissed off, yep, go out there and take those pictures. Yep, go and paint and make the best, make the best of it. Let that be your outlet. So thank you for just opening yourselves to that.
Thank you.
Off of that, one little piggyback off of that comment. Somebody else had asked, why keep going? Why do you do what you do? But me just kind of sitting here on the outside looking in, it sounds like just an energy transfer, from somebody either getting pissed off or sad about something or inspired about something, and then they put it on fabric, or they put it on paper, or they put it in a journal, and then that has that ripple effect that affects people like me. So I'm happy that y'all are writing and drawing and all that stuff. Keep going. Thank y'all for having this.
That makes me think of something that I'd maybe like to end on, and that is, it stems from reading James Baldwin, and just an interpretation of one of his stories, Sonny's Blues. But in that, we learn, I'll tell you the whole story another time if you want, but in that, he kind of talks about what it really means to be an artist. And, I think an artist isn't necessarily a painter or a writer or a photographer. Those are things we do, but I think what makes it become art is when there is emotion involved, and it's sort of described as, an artist is almost like a filter, like a filter of all the pain and the love and the suffering and just all the emotions. And, many artists just feel things a bit more deeper, and some of us, it even impacts us emotionally and psychologically. And being an artist means taking all of that and putting it back out into the world in a way that other people can experiencing it without feeling all that sadness or without succumbing to it like some might, so it's like a filtration system almost, where we put it back out into the world in a way where it's easier to comprehend, where you can just listen to a song and feel it, but all that went into creating that song was a lot of emotion, was a lot of feeling and a lot of thought, so.
That same piece, James Baldwin said, that is an artist's job.
Exactly.
That's their job. Being an artist, that's what you have to do.
Exactly. And I agree with that. So with that, I did want to just see if there's any of the families wanted to say anything. Thank you guys again so much for everything. And I want a picture of each of you in front of your pieces. Thank you.